This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest who's always playing to win. From P2W Fantasy and Fantrax, it's Nick Skrip. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Appreciate you having me on. I've been very excited for this. I know we touched base before and we tried to link up. It didn't work out. And then I had to watch everybody else come on the show. So I'm just glad that I got a chance to try it again and be on here with you today.
I'm thrilled to have you here. Obviously, the NFL season's wild. Sometimes, having a baby helps free up some time windows to make something like this happen, coordinating schedules and all that. But I'm excited to have you here. Seriously, it's been something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. So congrats on the new baby, the new arrival. How's everything going?
Very good, very good. So we already have a pair of 3-year-olds at home. So that dynamic's been very fun with them now not being the entire focus and them having to step up as older siblings. But it's been great. My wife and I have 2 shifts going on right now where she has a window where she's primarily taking care of our daughter and I get to sleep. And then I have mine at 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. So that's like my window of taking care of my daughter, but making a bunch of content. So I've been productive there, but she's doing great. My wife's doing great. I'm extremely grateful for those things.
Good. Well, that's obviously wild times, crazy times, but you gotta enjoy every second of it because it goes so fast, right?
Absolutely.
Now you're the NFL fantasy content lead at Fantrax, and you're doing social media there. What does your role consist of at this time? And congrats on that opportunity. I know that's something that you've been doing this last year, right?
Yeah. It started a month or two before the season started, and I had a bunch of meetings with Fantrax, and it worked out well. I oversee the writing team, so we have a group of writers for football content. So I organize kind of the content schedule and run ideas through them. And I produce a ton of content at the end of the day. It's something I always do, but I do it very specifically now for Fantrax, whether it's video content or graphics or streams or written content. I give them a bunch of different content, again, in different forms. And I also operate the social medias for them. So if you ever look at the Fantrax socials and you see a graphic of a different sport, it's made by myself. I do that for them. So it's been awesome to have both of those hats because I've always been a fantasy football guy. So I continue to be able to be a fantasy football guy, continue to be able to lead a team, and also just handle a bunch of socials there. So very, very happy to be with Fantrax. It's been great in my time being there. And I'm, looking forward to continuing to grow the brand in the fantasy football and the sports industry in general.
That's awesome. Now, from a consumer perspective, if you could step back and look at Fantrax and everything that it offers when it comes to features and tools and content and resources, what are your favorite things that Fantrax is doing these days?
Yeah, so, I don't want to just throw any other app under the bus or anything like that, but I remember historically utilizing other apps, maybe like ESPN or Yahoo, and thinking to myself, like, man, I wish I could do this on the app. I wish I can customize it in this way. And whenever you think those things when using the Fantrax app, it can actually be something you change and actually make happen in your leagues. It's the most customizable platform across all sports. So I know there's some apps that specialize very much so in one sport. Like I know Sleeper, for instance, they specialize in fantasy football. They offer other sports, but they truly specialize in fantasy football. Whereas Fantrax, we excel, I think, in all sports. We have college football, for instance. Almost all apps do not offer that. We have basketball, hockey's really big on Fantrax. And I think the fact that whatever you're looking to do in your league, you don't have to pay a premium like you would on MFL or something like that. You could do it on the Fantrax app. So extremely customizable. Like for baseball's coming up. The rosters are massive. You got prospects and everything you can be looking for there. So I just think at the end of the day, it's not limiting your fun, your customization, and what you have available to you.
Yeah, and they've been grinding for years trying to evolve and grow, and it's been fun to see. I remember when they first kind of popped on the scene, and so it's obviously an evolving tool that continues to get better and better. So I'm happy you're there, thrilled that you're there. In fact, and I think it's one of those things where it's the best is yet to come, right?
Yeah, still growing. I mean, this past season was year one doing things for them, and I've already learned a ton. Is a lot of different things. As somebody that leads a team, as somebody that creates things for social media, and just as a fantasy football analyst in general. So I think that year one was successful, but year two is going to be much bigger in terms of the impacts on the fantasy industry, and hopefully Fantrax's impacts on just being an app that people like to utilize.
I love it. Now you obviously you're a busy man because you got a professional life outside of this. Talk to me about your background in that on that front.
So, what I do outside of Fantrax, I work at a school district. I'm the data specialist there at the administrative center. I'm actually working from home now on paternity leave, but I do a ton there and wear so many different hats. I've been there for about 7 years. I also run a high school varsity soccer program locally. It is actually my former high school, so I do that when we are in season as well. So there's a specific time during the year where I have all three of those things going on at once, on top of the number one job, which is being a dad. So I'll have the soccer season, I'll have fantasy football season starting, the main job, trying to be a good husband, trying to be a good dad all at once. Obviously prioritizing the family aspect of it, but definitely stay busy outside of the fantasy world, which I know there's a lot of people that it's their entire job, entire focus, and I think that is awesome. For me, it's something that I treat as like my main focus when I'm in the zone actually producing the content. But yeah, definitely a lot of hats.
There's a lot of hats, and you do have a big background in soccer too, right? You played a ton of soccer growing up. Talk to me about your experience playing soccer.
Yeah, so I was a very good high school player. Earned a Division II scholarship at Lewis University here in Illinois. Went on there to be part of a team that went to the Sweet 16 nationally. Again, for Division II, I was a 2-year captain there. I started coaching soccer when I was 16 years old, so I started coaching at a very young age in terms of when other people typically start coaching. So I actually was in college as a college soccer player, but also still coaching and juggling that at the same time. That carried over following graduating college. I did my master's degree over at Aurora University, and the trade-off there was that the school, I would be their assistant coach, and they would pay for my master's degree. So I had 2 years of college coaching experience where I did, tons of recruiting and day-to-day stuff with that. And then I now most recently have been I'm entering my 4th year at Plainfield South High School here in Illinois. So in combination, a lot of playing experience, a lot of coaching experience in different ways. Again, high school, college, club soccer. I started again when I was 16, but it's been a huge piece of my life. And, a lot of people would be surprised to hear that because you see all this football stuff I do. I wasn't a football player. I have a heavy soccer background, but I think a lot of the things that I learned as a player and a coach kind of carried over into being like a creator and just doing stuff with sports.
So as a kid, like, were you a fan of all sports, or were you just diehard soccer? What was it like? Let's back up. You
Sure.
have one of the greatest collections of sports jerseys that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, you're
Yeah.
known for that. You obviously
Yeah.
have a passion for all sports. Go back to childhood. Like, what was your fandom like back then?
Yeah, so my dad introduced sports at a young age. I think I started playing baseball just like any other kid playing t-ball, and I think I got hit by too many pitches at one point. I'm like, I'm not trying to do this anymore. But just growing up, I think just my dad just being so heavily into sports and having it on TV and giving me and my brothers trading cards when we were little just sparked that interest. And I actually wasn't this massive soccer fan where I'm always watching soccer. I actually was more invested in the NFL and the MLB and the NBA, and just knowing the players and playing the video games and trying to get jerseys and having the action figures and the trading cards and all of that. So I think sports have always been pretty big for me growing up, just because that's what I really tie to my dad at the end of the day. He wasn't a soccer guy, didn't know anything about soccer, but he knew a ton about football, baseball, basketball, and he just always was, a way for us to connect. And it's still a way for us to connect. I go over there. He lives not too far from me. We watch sports together, talk about, the Bears and whatever else is going on. And it's always been like the thing that's tied me to my dad and my siblings.
Nice. So classic, like, sports fan, everything, but you just excelled at soccer. So you played that game. I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, did you grow up like in Illinois, right? Like in the Chicago area? How far are you from Chicago?
So I always tell everybody that I'm born and raised in the South Side of Chicago, even though I left the South Side of Chicago after kindergarten. But I like to say I'm from the South Side. And some people say I sound like I am from the South Side. But yeah, we lived there for a bit in the actual city growing up. And then for the most part, most of my life has been out in the suburbs, Plainfield, 45 minutes away basically from the city. Where I live now is borders pretty much where I grew up anyways. So I basically stood in the suburbs most of my life in Illinois. I've lived in Illinois my entire life.
Nice, nice. So who are your favorite teams and athletes of all sports growing up?
Yeah, so obviously there's always been ties to the Chicago teams. I've always been a big Bears, Bulls, and White Sox fan. I was obviously young when the Jordan era was a thing, but I remember distinctly like my dad and I having matching Dennis Rodman shoes growing up. I remember, obviously, in 2005, the White Sox won the World Series. That was awesome to see. But I always liked the guys from different teams. I grew up liking guys my dad talked about. I had jerseys that were like still too big to this day for me back when I was like 11 years old. I remember having like a random, like a Mike Vick jersey and a Mike Allstott jersey and, whoever else back then. So just grew up liking the different names, grew up in the era where, you had Mark McGwire versus Sammy Sosa, those sort of things. And you just always remember back then how cool it was being a kid and just seeing these like superhero athletes back in the day. I don't know if it's the same sort of look it is today. I guess I can't speak for, the kids of today's era, but I just remember growing up, just looking at some of these guys and thinking, man, these guys are absolute monsters, beasts, all that sort of thing.
For sure. No, you're right. That McGuire Sosa, that summer, that duel, the home run title, that was incredible. Like I remember that. That was fantastic. So as a sports fan, what was your worst loss? Like worst loss you ever experienced?
I think one of the things that comes to mind always when it comes to what really stands out and still is sour to this day is the Bears going to the Super Bowl against the Colts. I don't have the year off the top of my head, but I will always remember opening kickoff, Devin Hester returning a touchdown, doing typical Devin Hester things. And then we realized we were playing, Peyton Manning and having to watch the Bears lose a Super Bowl. So I think that obviously, more recently, the double doink that hurt to watch that. I think we were all out at a bar with a bunch of friends and family and just watching that and then seeing everybody on the internet talk about it, but like actually being a Chicago fan and processing that at the time, that one hurt too. But when it comes to Chicago sports, I think it's always waves at the end of the day. I think we've had a lot of big moments. I think we've had a lot of moments that have really irked us over time, but it's all in fun of sport.
I love it. No, I think that was probably 2005, 2006, right in there. Yeah, that was a great way to start off a Super Bowl. Obviously, when you're facing Manning, it's kind of inevitable that he was going to get that title, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite all-time sports moment?
All-time sports moment. So this one has a sentimental tie to it, but it's rare because again, I've been a soccer fan. And I've watched a lot of soccer, but it would never be my first choice. I'd always watch, NFL, NBA, MLB, all those things before soccer. But the World Cup, I think might have been 05 too, or 06, 2006 World Cup. Italy won the World Cup, and my nana, 100% Italian, once lived next to my parents. And we watched every single Italy game together, from the group stages all the way to like whatever the playoffs are called, a knockout round, I guess, into the actual World Cup. And I just remember watching those games of Italy playing, and they were not the favorite by any means, but we would be so happy together and just cheering them on, and they would win a game. And we're like, oh man, they're looking pretty good. And to actually see them win the World Cup, which is the biggest trophy on any stage, on any sport, and just having that memory of celebrating with her and high-fiving and like shaking, just seeing her like shake her fists in the air and really remembering that was something that I'll always remember. I was as close to my nana as I am my mother. And she, unfortunately passed away 2017. So, that's one of those things that you look back and you're like, man, that is one of the memories I'll never forget for somebody that, I love dearly.
I love that. No, I think that, when I ask people that question, it's never just, like my favorite team won. There's always something sentimental attached to it. It might be your favorite team winning, but there's always something more, right? There's something nostalgic and sentimental about it. And for you, I mean, that's phenomenal. You tie, childhood, growing up, family, someone very important to you, and celebrating, in that moment. That's wonderful. I love that. So when did you discover fantasy sports? When did you start playing?
So I had my brother's my best friend, and he's historically run fantasy leagues and been an avid fantasy player. He always was trying to get me to play fantasy football, and I always said no. And I actually started playing fantasy football pretty late in comparison to some other people, because I didn't start playing until after I graduated college. And the reason being is that again, I played NCAA Division II soccer, and the rule book for NCAA is it's like a Bible. It's extremely lengthy, and you have to be careful, because if you break a rule, the rules are bigger than any player at a Division II level. So you're probably not going to be at that school. You'll be suspended. And one of the things that my coach harped on was, you cannot bet on sports. You cannot bet on sports of any kind, and that's part of the NCAA rules. So I avoided fantasy football at all costs, because I didn't want to get, and what were the odds I was going to get caught? I don't know, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, whatever it was, but I just didn't want to take the chance. So I always avoided fantasy football. And then I graduated, and finally my brother convinced me, hey, join this league. And I think my first league might have been a dynasty league, like straight away. And it was a home dynasty league that he started, that still is going on today. But he was the first one to introduce me to fantasy sports. And he jokes around. He's like, you never take anything, to just be a casual. He's like, you have to take something and go level 100 with it all the time. He's like, you didn't even play fantasy, and then out of nowhere, a couple years later, you're a fantasy analyst, like for a company and stuff like that. So that was how it got introduced to me. It was back in the day, probably playing on a ESPN league, and then slowly the snowball effect happened, where I was like, I like this. Oh, fantasy baseball is kind of cool too. Fantasy basketball is cool, but fantasy football, let's do a lot of leagues. And it just, spiraled from there, just like everybody else.
Nice. Do you remember like whose content you consumed back in the day?
Yeah, so I knew nothing about the fantasy football industry. I knew nothing about where to find content. You can Google stuff. The only people that I ever saw do any sort of content was the guys back on ESPN. So you got Matthew Berry and Field Yates and Stefania Bell. That group is the only group I knew about. So I would like listen to them and look up their takes and listen to their podcasts, and I would, reference them at times, and I'd be like, well, Field Yates just said this, and arguing with my brother about stuff. And then, eventually when you dove a little bit deeper, you start to see, hey, there's actually a lot of people doing a lot of things for fantasy football, and a lot of companies and all of that. But at the time, that was pretty much the only thing. I think eventually I would hear of like Fantasy Pros, and you look up their rankings and be like, oh, Fantasy Pros has this guy ranked here, and you'd argue about that just because it was on a website or something like that. So it was very, very, very basic when I first started, very, very casual. It wasn't until I really dove in that I started realizing how big the fantasy industry and world truly was.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I mean, I played for forever, and I just kind of, I listened to some of the analysts like on the platforms that I'm playing on, whether it's like Yahoo or ESPN, but I too didn't know this whole world existed. And that's what really kind of inspired me to get more involved in the community and the industry. It's that exact thing. It's discovering this whole world of people that I didn't even know existed. People that just work so hard, and content that's just next level. Seeing that, really inspired me. And so it sounds like you kind of had that experience. Like there's this whole new world of something I love. Let's dive in. I love it.
Yep.
So what do you love most about playing the game? Like, what is it about fantasy that drives you with excitement and passion?
I think it just makes Sundays fun at the end of the day. I think like watching sports has always been something I like to do. I think it's something that was an easy way to be social, to meet up with friends, and maybe have a couple drinks and hang out, But I think even if you're by yourself and there's something that means more than those games, it makes sports even more fun. So when you have your lineup out and you're looking and seeing scoring for the guys on TV, that to me was always just like, hey, this is even more fun than just watching sports, to actually have it mean something personal to you. You have personally a lineup of guys that you drafted and invested in, and you get to watch them on TV, and what those guys do on TV had to do with what you were going to do against somebody else. So I thought that was always made it fun at the end of the day. I'm naturally competitive, again, like with such a sports background and being, former college athlete and all that. So I love competing. I love, going head to head against somebody and trying to win a championship at the end of the day. I think that's always fun. So there's just like that, extra push, I think, playing fantasy of like that competitive, talk in the back of your head sort of edge that I've always had. And I'm way better than I was back then about like not being a sore loser and not taking it overly serious. But it's definitely been something that has made Sundays and made the weeks more fun.
Nice. Do you have a primary league that you consider like your main league?
Yeah, I'd say my brother's home dynasty league that I mentioned before. It's changed a bit. We've had some, very little turnover, but most of the guys that are in it now have been in it for a long time. It's a single quarterback league, still has a kicker, still has a defense, PPR league. But that league's always been competitive because everybody that's in it is people that I would see throughout the year. I got my brother, I have my cousin, I have some of my best friends in there, I have some of his friends, and we all hung out and met up before, and we can do that pretty easily. And I think that, I'm in industry leagues with some awesome people, and I'm not going to say I don't take those serious because I do. But I think there's always just much more of a difference when it's with people that you get to see in everyday life all the time, or people you grew up with, or family, or your actual friends that you hang out on the weekends to actually compete against and talk about what's going on in the league and things like that. So I'd say that home dynasty league definitely hits different.
Nice. So you guys do live drafts?
We have in the past. I also run like a home dynasty IDP league, which is kind of cool. But we've tried for the rookie drafts to meet up, and sometimes everybody's there. Sometimes only like 2 or 3 people are there. There's been times where it's the summer, everybody's busy, and people are starting to become more and more adults, and getting married and having kids and all of that. So we've tried to do it as much as possible, and sometimes those have turned into like long days, hanging out, and it turns into something else where it turns into like a party, and then, hanging out later throughout the night and all those things. But yeah, that's always fun to get, in person and draft. I love me a slow draft offline when I have a window during my lunch break, but it's different when you're in person and you just get to hang out.
Yeah. What is your favorite part of the live draft experience?
I think just the reactions with people. And I think also there's a huge difference when you have the ability to trade with somebody face to face. So let's say you have a rookie draft, you're about to pick, you're at the 106, and somebody walks up to you and says, like, listen, like I will give you these things if you send me this. That's different than like getting a text message or a DM on whatever app you're using and saying, what are you looking for the 106? It's literally like in your face, like you're having a conversation like me and you are, and you see like these explosive deals on draft day, and then you see everybody else in the room reacting to it. I think that's extremely fun, and it's something you look forward to every single year.
I like it. Who's your biggest rival in a fantasy league?
I've mentioned him before, but my brother Anthony is my best friend. We give each other a lot of stick, I'll say, all the time when it comes to competing with anything. So if we are facing each other and he beats me, I know I'm going to get a text message with like an emoji or just something very small that he knows is going to jab me, and I'll do the same thing. And we are 2 of the most active guys in all the leagues that we are in together. I think we're in at least 2, maybe 3 leagues, but we're both very competitive. We're both very adamant on trading and making moves and all those things. So I'd say he is for sure my biggest rival, and he's probably the person that annoys me the most at the end of the day when it comes to fantasy football. But we have a lot of fun with it.
I love it. What's the age difference?
About 4 years. So I think when I was a senior in high school, he was a freshman. So
Oh, nice.
we got to experience that 1 year of me walking up to him in the hallway and embarrassing him in front of girls and, his friends and things like that. And we as adults have grown into best friends. So I mean, if I need to talk to somebody, I'm talking to him. He lives 5 minutes away, so we hang out a lot. He has a daughter now that is 8 months, and I just had a newborn, and he's the godfather of my 3-year-old daughter. I'm the godfather of his daughter. So we're very close, and we live extremely close to each other. And my family's always been very tight knit. So it's nice to have that.
I love that. That's awesome. Now, do you have favorite settings, formats in fantasy?
Yeah, I will always play PPR. That's one thing. I love my IDP league. It's not something I would say is my favorite setting, and everybody should try it. But I do like having a league or two that are different than all your other leagues. Because I know I'm in a lot of leagues that they mirror each other, and the only difference is the people in it. I think it's cool to have leagues where, you know, you have one IDP league, and you have a league that is a one quarterback, and you have a league that's a super flex where you could start two quarterbacks, and you have a league that's a double tight end league. So I think that's the one thing that I do like, is that there's a diversity of leagues that I play in. I don't mind. A lot of people hate one quarterback leagues. I think I kind of like it almost better. And I know that's a hot take here, but I almost feel like the industry sometimes is so hyper focused on these super flex leagues that, you know, the quarterbacks are the sole focus of them. But I almost want to say I enjoy the one quarterbacks just as much, if not more. And, you know, you have to emphasize everybody else, every other position in them because of that. But yeah, I'm not too adamant about, you know, the league I play in has to be this. I'd say the only thing I care about is making sure it's PPR, and otherwise I'm up for whatever at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love the idea of a variety as well. Like, the more leagues you're in, the more different they are. I guess if they're all the same, you know, it kind of blends in. It's kind of becomes stale, right? Whereas if you're in a variety of leagues, like you can care about a lot of them, you know, with some passion, because they're unique, they're different. I like it. Like, you know, playing like a guillotine league or something like that, like something unique. It's always fun. It's always fun. So when did you decide to start creating fantasy content, and what inspired that?
So I believe it was back in, I'm looking at the date right here, 2020. I always look at whenever I first joined Twitter. That's how I know, like, I was starting content creation at that time. So it was during COVID times, just like everybody else. And I was very much into fantasy football. I thought I was, you know, good in my leagues, and that I looked into things a little bit deeper than everybody else. And I did some research. So one day I'm sitting working from home, and I'm thinking to myself, hey, I think I'm going to try to write articles. And I think it would be super cool if people read those articles. Like, how cool would that be, right? So I started a WordPress, and I created a P2W fantasy logo within a Word document that was terrible. It was just like a couple different icons, like a baseball, football, and a basketball. And it was in a terrible font, P2W fantasy. Uploaded it to Twitter. My name was P2W fantasy, not Nick Skrip. And I started writing articles, and I tried to follow other accounts and try to find ways to interact with people. And that was the start of it. It was just literally that. It was literally that. I like fantasy football. What if I could write stuff that people could read? And I didn't care about anything, you know, in terms of like, I want to be known. I want to, you know, people to, you know, think I'm the best content creator in the world. I want to make a lot of money. None of those things really mattered at the time. The only thing that mattered was like putting thoughts onto paper that people actually were going to look at. And that was like the first domino. And then once I flicked that, like 1,000 of them fell down, and I again took it to level 10, because I feel like that's very much me at the end of the day. For people that know me in life, like, I don't just like do something to just casually do it. Most of the time I'm like 1,000% into something. So that was very much true when it came to fantasy football and what spiraled from there.
So what inspired the Playing to Win name?
Yeah, so that actually came from my college coach. He all the time told us before games, like, let's not just show up today to compete. Like, let's show up for a result. And that was something that has stuck with me for a long time. Like, don't just show up just to show up. Don't just show up to compete with other people. Like, show up with the intention of winning. And obviously, when it comes to fantasy football, it's supposed to be fun. You're not going to win your league every single year. But I had this like mentality of like, hey, if I'm going to talk about fantasy football, I feel like that's a good thing to push. Like, hey, like, don't just play to play. Like, let's play to win. And I'm going to help you play to win at the end of the day. Because again, you can have fun and you can completely be casual about it. Not everybody needs to be a try hard, like totally invested. All your time is fantasy football, anything like that. But I thought that was a cool mentality of like, hey, like, I'm here not just to help you compete. Like, I'm here to help you play to win at the end of the day. And that really stuck out to me. And that brand is something I still to this day keep and tied to not just me as a brand, but also just like the way I produce content and the way that I try to help people out. And my mission statement, I guess you'd say, as a content creator still stands to this day is helping you play to win.
And it's a phenomenal name. It fits. It definitely fits your approach to it. So you basically started out on your own, creating content, and that led to other opportunities. I know you did some work with Fantasy Points.
Mhm.
Talk to me about like kind of what happened from the beginning to getting the opportunity with Fantrax.
Yeah, so I started writing the articles, and eventually I would start finding people in the industry, and I would just DM them and say, "Hey, can you add a paragraph to this article I'm writing? Here's the topic. All I need is one paragraph." To me, that was very smart because not only one did it help me build connections with other people in the industry by collaborating, but also I thought, hey, if they write on this and I tag them and they are featured in this, maybe they will retweet it or something or like it, and then their followers will see it, and now I can have even more of a reach. So I started doing that, and then eventually I started thinking to myself, hey, it'd be cool. Like I wouldn't mind being on like a video, and I tested the waters out with that. I would have a topic, I made a quick video, and I put it on Twitter. And that's something I still like to this day do all the time. Like I'll tweet, I'll write articles, and I'll do data stuff. But I put a lot of my face out there just in short videos, and I started doing that. Eventually started the P2W Fantasy Podcast where myself and my brother were talking on there. Then it was myself, my brother, and a friend. And then eventually I did basically what you're doing right now. And I try to get as many people from the industry as possible on my podcast. So I'd have all these different topics. And I think I had over 100 guests on at one point. And that became like a thing, the P2W Fantasy Podcast. I feel like the traction was pretty decent. And eventually I had someone from Fantasy Points who's no longer there reach out and offer me like a partnership with them. They had a Fantasy Points media group where they would feature other podcasts that were attached to Fantasy Points. So I ended up doing that, but then I kind of got more acquainted with some of the staff there. And then within Fantasy Points, my role changed a bit. I started doing like a live stream for them on Sundays. And eventually I started, adding as much content to them as I could. I linked up with Scott Barrett, who is I guess it's on his bio. He says CEO of Fantasy Points, but he's one of the faces of Fantasy Points. Scott Barrett and I did a lot of shows together where we would feature other people from the industry. And I thought that was such a great opportunity because Scott Barrett, to me, is one of the best analysts in the industry. So I learned a lot from Scott by podcasting with him and linking up with other people there. So I spent a lot of time, or a decent amount of time with Fantasy Points as somebody that, was just partnered up. And then it grew into like, hey, he's actually like a staff member now. And I started doing stuff with them and for them. And eventually just didn't work out in terms of sticking together. Kind of went off on my own for a bit, and then eventually just linked up with Fantrax and had a really big role there. So it definitely was the case of starting small and just kind of, how do I grow on this? How do I grow on this? So let me try something different. Let's try this out. Let's expand in this way. And it's always been a lot of trial and error and a lot of work at the end of the day.
A lot of hard work, and that is one thing that is again so obvious with you. So much passion, dedication to the grind. Where does that come from? Like, where does that mentality come from for you?
Yeah, I will again tie it to the athletic background. I think I've always been a person that does a lot of things on my own without anybody telling me to do them, or without somebody motivating me, or without somebody pushing me to do anything. As a college athlete back in the day, during the summer, I would spend tons and tons and tons of time on my own, spending time with the ball, lifting and working out, and truly trying to build myself and getting after things consistently. And I was very competitive in doing so. And I think that's something that's carried over into the fantasy industry is just like having that competitive edge. Like, hey, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to compete with anybody else in the industry. It's more of a competition with like myself and trying to grow as a content creator and expand the outreach. But I am very competitive when it comes to being a creator in the industry, and I am somebody that wants to do a lot of things that I have not yet, and I don't think I'm anywhere near where I want to be. And I think it's just always been this internal drive of never really being satisfied. Always kind of hungry to produce and grow and do good things and put out work. So if you look at my page some days I'll have 3 things, some days I'll have 8 things, but it's always me pretty much every single day trying to put out something, just being devoted to doing what I'm doing at the end of the day. I think one thing that I would say about myself is I am very disciplined, and I don't want to be a motivational speaker, but I think that a lot of people rely on motivation, and that's not something that I think you should. I think it's just being able to be disciplined about something you want to do and consistent with it. So when it comes to producing content, I feel like I'm pretty disciplined and consistent on doing things on a daily basis and trying different things out versus like doing something because I'm motivated to do it. So that's kind of been my mantra, I guess, when it comes to that. But I'm probably just a little bit of over the top when it comes to this whole topic, but it's something I love to do at the end of the day.
No, I love it. No, it's inspirational. You've inspired a ton of people, I'm sure, during your journey. Absolutely. What's been the most difficult challenge for you so far?
I think day to day, it's just dealing with the highs and lows of traction with what you do, because there's times where I will spend a lot of time on something and maybe it's seen by a lot of people. I guess it's cool on like Twitter. Now you can see the views of what a piece is done, but to produce something that I spent a lot of time on and then it gets 10 likes or something like that, that could be something that's difficult at times, but it's never ever changed like my mentality and like me wanting to do content. But I think that's a piece of it, is just dealing with the highs and lows of traction. There's days where you make a video and it does awesome across TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and there's days you're gonna spend a lot of time and it just doesn't do well. But at the end of the day, you got to roll with the punches. You got to roll with the highs and the lows. That's one thing. I think always too, and it's just a personal thing. The never feeling satisfied thing, and it's a good thing because it drives me a bit, but also it can add up after a while. It's always the case of like, I like what I'm doing right now, I like where I'm at, but I need to be doing more. I need to be doing better. I need to be growing in this facet. I need to be expanding here. So I feel like that's been something that will never go away. I think that's something personal to me when it comes to everything in life. It's just that anxious, like anxiety thing of like never feeling satisfied about anything, but still trying to balance enjoying it and having fun and not making it, a task at the end of the day. So just some, interpersonal things that I think a lot of people deal with at the end of the day, but are not things that impact me outside of the fantasy world. It doesn't impact me emotionally or mentally or any of those things. So yeah, things that come to mind.
Makes sense. Yeah, and obviously, you can't do anything without good support, good networking, good
Yes.
good network of supporters. Right. Talk about the fantasy football community. What's that meant to you over the years when it comes to the support you've gotten from others, and maybe dial that into your experience going to the expo for the first time.
Yeah, I think the expo actually has been something. It's amazing to link up and see people like yourself, guys that you've interacted with on or within the industry, and be able to go up to them in person and shake hands and talk and just have a drink with and hang out with. I think that has been a true sense of community at the end of the day, and it's been awesome to meet somebody who you've linked up with on a podcast, but actually get to like feel like, hey, we're buddies off the internet too, and you get to hang out in that sense. I think that it's also been a great spot. It's also been a very motivating place to be as well, because I feel like as a creator, there's been times where I've gone to the expo and I've had someone come up to me and just tell me, hey, I really like the stuff you do. I really think that you've been killing it. I think you're doing a great job. I had a guy. His name's Stacy. He came up to me at the expo this year, and he's like, Nick, I just really wanted to shake your hand. And we've never really spoke a ton outside of the expo, maybe just on the internet here and there. But he's like, I really want to shake your hand. I want to let you know that you grind like no other, and you do a great job. And I shook his hand, and like that little interaction was the most motivating thing for me at the end of the day. Just to have somebody that like respects what you do at the end of the day. So expo has been awesome. It's a place I want to be every single year. Obviously, when the more kids I have over here now and having that going on, I'm hoping to get back there this year, but that's been great. And I think the friendships that I built through the industry have been amazing. I mentioned to you before the podcast, but like a guy like John McGlynn, I met him through the internet and realized he lives 5 minutes down the road from me. And we became great friends. Kevin Coleman, who I saw you just had on the show, I speak to him more than I speak to most of my, friends from home here. Those little things speak a lot to the industry at the end of the day.
I love it. Yeah, John McGlynn's amazing. Kevin Coleman, what an incredible person he is. He did say on the podcast that you have never beaten him in fantasy. Is this accurate?
I wouldn't listen to anything that guy says at the end of the day. I think he beat me one time, and I had a really good excuse that I can't speak of on this podcast. But yeah, Kevin's a guy. Kevin's a guy that I do enjoy competing with when it comes to fantasy football, and him and I just had like a nice StreamYard conversation this past weekend, and we talk pretty much every day. I'd say I talk to Kevin. So if that doesn't speak to what the community brings, I don't know what does, because he's been one of my best friends I've had since I've been in this industry, and not just, my internet friends, like actual real life friends.
Yeah, I mean that's what's so cool about the expo, and about, I guess, what everybody has experienced over the last handful of years, is just these internet connections like have actually become real friends. I've seen so many great friendships and relationships, professional, personal relationships that have developed because of everything we've been in over the last handful of years. And so it's been fun to see. I love to hear those stories. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out some questions. You just let me know the first things that come to mind. What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry right now?
Being allowed to produce content in any form I want to. So if I want to drop a video, I'm going to drop a video. If I want to do an article, I'll drop an article, a data drop, a graphic, just having the full allowance to produce stuff on my own platform and the Fantrax platform in different forms. I'm not just a podcaster. I'm not just a writer or any of those things.
I love it. Name one person that you'd like to watch a football game with, just to see their perspective and listen to their perspective on the game.
I think I'd like, just so, we're so offensive focused when it comes to fantasy football content in the fantasy football industry. I'd love to sit with like a legend, someone on the defensive end of the ball, just to see from their perspective and hear from their perspective. Hey, this is what the offense is doing. This is what I look for. Like a guy like Ed Reed or something like that. I think that'd be awesome, just to like sit with him and pick his brain from, being a safety and just like looking and seeing an offense and saying, this is what I can read when they line up like this, and this guy's, movements like that. I think that'd be awesome.
That's a good one. I love it. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of sports?
Like hanging out with the family, my family at the house, my family that's not too far away, for just hanging out, sitting around, watching stuff, or having some drinks, or playing games. I'm huge into working out, work out every single day, 6 days a week, I'd say. And that's like a huge piece of my everyday life. And it has been for a long time. That's my escape to a sense there. But I love that.
I love it. What's the last TV show that you binged?
My wife and I'll say it, but my wife and I have been watching Love is Blind. I didn't pick it out.
I knew that was coming.
I didn't pick it out. She picked it out. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't like it and I'm not invested. I'm not waiting for the next episode to come out tonight. But that's what we've been watching together. We've been bonding over that. So, Nick Skrip, tattoos and jerseys, tough guy mantra, is watching Love is Blind. So
I'm right there with you, brother. How about an all-time favorite TV show?
Not a massive TV guy at the end of the day. I'd say one within the last few years I really liked was The Boys, because I'm a big superhero guy, or I always was growing up. So, to see an adult version superhero show, I thought was very cool. The storyline was pretty fun. So in terms of a recent one, I think I'd go with that.
Do you have an all-time favorite movie?
Sticking with the superhero, but it's got to be The Dark Knight. It's got to be The Dark Knight. There's just so much in that movie. Great storyline, great characters, great acting, some emotion packed into a lot of action. It's got to be The Dark Knight for me.
There's that Kevin Coleman bond right there, right?
If I have to bond with him, sure.
How about an all-time favorite sports movie?
Sports movie? Oh man, that one's tough. I mean, there's you got the classics with the Remember the Titans, and you got some other football movies, even something small like funny like Varsity Blues or something like that. Like there's a lot of different routes I can take with that. But I think just like the classics that we would watch on the bus ride home from games or to games when I was back at Lewis as a college athlete. I always think about those because they'd be a bit motivating.
I love it. What are you most grateful for at this time?
I would say healthy family, and I'm not trying to just say like the obvious answer, but we just had our daughter. She is now over a week old. Both of my 3-year-olds are doing great. My wife's doing well. And I think that's something that you can take for granted at times is health, because we know how fast that can turn for somebody. And we see a lot of people born into the world that have these health conditions and issues. So I'm just very thankful that I got a house full of healthy people right now.
I love it. Now, again, it's been fun to see your rise in the industry. You've mentioned several people, but I'll give you the opportunity right now. Like, can you name some of the people that have just had the biggest impact on you during your journey in the fantasy sports industry?
Yeah, so I know I've talked a lot about Kevin. I'm going to just mention him because I will always mention him. But Kevin's one of the best people I know in the industry in terms of a person, being a content creator, a friend, a husband, and a father. So he is somebody that I've truly inspired to continue to be like, because he embraces all of those things. So you'll see me post stuff about my kids or my wife and things like that, and I truly try to embrace those things, and I respect that about Kevin, because I think that he produces amazing work. I think he's an extremely slept on content creator. I think a lot of people know him and like him, but I think he could be even more followed, 10 times his following, just because he does tons of good work. But he inspires me to be not just a good content creator, but a good, again, dad, husband, all of those things too. I mentioned Scott Barrett before. Scott's a guy that I did a lot of content before in the past. It's been a bit, but he's somebody that produces very, very high level content that goes beyond what most people do. And he does what he does very well. He's one of the few people that I consume content from, Scott Barrett. And then the last guy, and I've had the pleasure of doing a podcast with him, and then I've met him in person this past year at the Expo, is JJ Zacharyson. I think that the way he does his podcast, where it's like 15 minutes of straight knowledge that is very consumable for a fantasy analyst like myself, or a casual fan, the way that he can reach out to both of those people within 15 minutes in the same episode, I think just speaks to how great he is at doing his job. I am going to be honest, and this is not a knock on anybody. I don't consume content. I really don't, just because I feel like I produce so much content that my windows outside of producing content, I don't want to really be consuming it. But he is the person that if I had to listen to a podcast, which I do listen to his stuff, is who I would listen to. It would be JJ Zacharyson. And I think that the most casual fantasy fan all the way through the most in-depth fantasy analyst can always get something out of JJ.
I love JJ is phenomenal. I was going to ask you about, again, you brought up earlier John McGlynn, like finding out that you guys live close by, making that connection. Talk to me a little bit more about the man, the myth, the legend, John McGlynn.
John's a great guy. I know he can be a little spicy on the internet sometimes and make people mad, but John's a very, very great friend at the end of the day. I didn't randomly, but I did a podcast with him on his show, I don't know, a few months back. And I asked him right before, hey, could you stop by afterwards? Because I'm trying to get this couch from the garage into the basement, and my wife is losing her mind because I am banging up the wall trying to Hulk it by myself. So he's literally that guy. We did a podcast together. He drove over 5 minutes later. We lifted this into the basement, and then he was on his way. He texted me when I had my daughter. He said, when can I bring over a gift? We've hung out tons of times. Him and my dad hang out together without me all the time. That's the guy John McGlynn is. I think he's one of the best guys I know, because if you need something, he's going to be the first guy to go and do it. He's been working very hard. I think he should have more follows within the industry, because he has been featuring people on his podcast, and he does a great job as a host, and he knows the game very well as a former college football player himself. If you ever seen the guy, he's massive, so it makes sense. But very, very good guy. Somebody that I think I'm very thankful for to have as a friend in my life.
Yeah, he's a winner right there. Look at that guy.
There we go.
He is.
Oh my God. There we go.
John McGlynn is in the house.
Now I'm blushing on camera. Look at this.
This was not my idea, Nick. You could thank Kevin for this.
Well, I got to bring John McGlynn in and share some words about Nick Skrip. You've told me before, what you think of this guy. Tell the world what you think about this guy, Nick Skrip.
So I just listened to Nick ramble off a bunch of names of people that he follows, the people that inspire him, that he gets content from. I don't think there's anybody out there that does what Nick does. I don't think everybody knows the background of Nick, that he gets up in the morning, he goes, works out, he does his P2W fit stuff. He gets home, He's got a baby at home now. He's got 2 other kids that are just about the same age, just married. He runs a soccer program. He's got a full-time job. He puts out more content than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And it's not just like, hey, I would do wide receiver 2 because blah. He's got, a whole page of my Twitter timeline goes 40 things deep on these threads because he just proves his point. He says why he backs up what he's talking about, why he thinks that way. And and to play in a couple leagues with him too, it's me and him are I do a lot of back and forth trading. He sends me pretty good offers, and I'm like, nah, I hate accepting offers that are sent. I gotta go back and forth for a while just to make sure I got the best I could possibly get. But he sends some really good offers, but the guy, he backs up what he says. Anything he puts on the internet, man, I'll send that trade just joking around. And if it's right, he'll take it. That kind of stuff. He's the most informed person I know. He's a workaholic. He's just a nice guy. He's got a handful of like go-to friends that that's his ride or die guys, and that's Nick's just Nick. It's hard to explain someone that's that dedicated and to his lifestyle, to his family, to his friends, to his brother and his dad are like his go-tos all, that, and it's tight. My family still lives like in the city limits, they got to live there. So I don't see him as much as I do, but just to see Nick walking, with his dad, his brother all the time. I'm kind of jealous because I don't have that anymore, moving out in the suburbs, but I see Nick, I live through him. And like you said, I hang out with Frankie, his dad, a lot. Good dude. But Nick's right off the yoke from his dad. He's a great dude. You can't say enough stuff about Nick, but you could see it. He projects himself through the internet. I'm not even on half these apps he's on, but every once in a while he pops up on InstaFace and something else and things I don't even subscribe to. But he's everywhere. He does it to put out the content he does and the things that he does with the schedule he has. Nobody can make excuses. I've got 4 kids. My kids are a little bit older now. I just got in this industry. He's better with computers and stuff than I am, but I'm getting better. But nobody can make excuses because what this guy does in a 24-hour day, it would take me 3 years to do what he does in a week. It's unbelievable what he does. It's just absolutely fascinating to see someone with his work ethic, and to put his product where his mouth is at. It's great to see.
I love it. Now was that not a good testimony? I think that pretty much nails it. I love it. You guys are great. We're going to talk just for a couple minutes. Let's talk a little bit about the 2024 off season. What are your favorite aspects of the off season? Is it the free agency? Is it the draft? Is it when training camp comes around? Start with you, Nick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just put out some stuff about free agent, and also I appreciate the kind words, John. And I'll send you the payment through Venmo within the next 24 hours. I got to just ask my wife first, but I think the free agency is always a ton of fun. Everybody's diving into prospects right now, so you got guys hyping up, 8th round future rookies, and you have guys that are being, controversial with takes and all that. And I think it's a time people are having fun with things, but I truly think free agency is probably one of my favorite times, just because it's cool to see guys in new homes and see them produce. Obviously the 24 class is going to be a lot of fun, and we're learning more and more things. We got the combine this week. So the fact that there's always something to talk about, like I've seen people, come out on the internet and say, hey, man, this time of year is dead. I don't really know what to make content about. I'm like, are you kidding me? There's a million things you could be talking about right now. So I just love that. I love that.
How about you, John? What's your favorite part of the off season?
The speculation of the rookie draft coming up, it just because nobody knows what's going on. It's so fantastic, and I go to drafts a lot. Me and Nick were at a bar by our house a couple years ago, McBride's 52, when I couldn't go to the draft. But I've gone to Tennessee. I plan on going to Detroit this year. I love these drafts. But my favorite thing in the offseason is the in-person drafts in my home dynasty leagues, where I get to sit and go beer for beer with Nick and see how he survives, and then go.
Doesn't work out well.
I love it.
Yeah, all of our offseason, like in a home league stuff, our in-person drafts, our division drafting, our stuff like that. That's the fun for me. This fantasy football stuff, I love doing it. I'm way behind the 8 ball because I just started a couple years ago because I was raising kids the entire time with coaching and stuff like that, but. Man, it's fun getting into it, but I see myself. It's like the turtle and the hare. Like, here's me getting off the starting line, and here's Nick already at the finish line, kind of thing. It's like it's unbelievable how good he is at stuff like that. But it's there's, like Nick said, there is no off season in fantasy football. Right now is the best because there's so much research, there's so much stuff you can do, so much stuff you can write, so much stuff. It just these shows, the things you do, the things you talk about are endless.
I love it. I love it. You guys, is there any players that you're excited to jump ADP, in the fall, like when we're drafting redraft, that you just have to get based on what we've seen this year?
I think, there's I always stand by guys that didn't have a great season the year prior that I still believe in the talent. There's like, I have a long list of guys, but I'm sure when the quarterback change happens, that'll change for his ADP. But like a guy like Drake London didn't have a great 2023 or this past season, but I believe in the talent. A guy like Javonte Williams, I believe in his talent. So I'm going to go and grab him despite him having a poor season, obviously tied to like health and things like that. I also think with the rookies, you'll have all these people that will tell you like it's rookie fever. Don't take this guy so early in redraft. But you look at this past season, and you see guys like Jaden Reed and you go down the list of the rest of the rookies that had the Sam Laporta and these guys that had a big rookie season impact. And sometimes rookie fever is justified. So, guys that fall into opportunities where they can get the touches and the volume, I don't mind reaching on them a little bit in redraft, even if it is rookie fever. So I think it's just that balance of believing in talent and also believing in opportunity of new guys.
Yeah, great
in the
advice.
league, I'm going after Jahan Dotson is my guy I'm looking forward to get right now. And then in the rookie drafts, I'm going after Braylon Allen because he's my running back one in this class. And a lot of people disagree with me, but that's who I'll trade up for to get, and that it is what it is.
I love it. Nick, any rookies that you're just excited to find, a great landing spot with? Who in this upcoming class? I don't know if you've dived in or dove in enough right now, but is there anybody that you're really excited to see where they land?
I want to just briefly, I'm not going to break them down at all, but I want to mention like Rome Odunze, because I feel like the whole internet is talking on this big Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Neighbors debate and how they should be in the same tier. Maybe they shouldn't be in the same tier. Some guys are like Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr. Rome Odunze feels like what Justin Jefferson might have been a couple years back. And I'm not saying he's going to be Justin Jefferson. I'm not going to say he's going to be the wide receiver one of this class either. But back in the day, if you remember, we had CeeDee Lamb versus Jerry Jeudy. And then it ended up like Justin Jefferson was like a dog in himself. And I feel like that might be the case for Rome Odunze, who's going to have a high draft capital, but he's not getting that same like hype, which maybe he doesn't deserve, but he's not getting that same attention is Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be drafted probably within the first 15 picks and is a guy that probably can have a good impact his rookie season. And again, we're just looking at him as a guy that he's the wide receiver 3. We're not going to hype him up as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree for sure. He's, playing football 35 minutes away from me, and he is special, like truly special. So I'm excited to see where he lands because you're right. I mean, the other guys are getting the spotlight, but he can play football. So wherever he goes, it's gonna be a good fit, I would imagine. Now, Nick, you've done so much in this community. Or in this industry. Your drive, it's inspired people. You've done so much on your own with content creation. What advice do you have for people that want to get more involved in content creation in the fantasy space?
Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and try new things. I think everybody should try just about everything as a content creator. Maybe you strictly have been a writer for the entire duration of being a content creator. Why not try putting a video out of yourself? I've had conversations with people about, they DM me, what do you think about this if I made a video of this? And I say, do it. And sometimes those people that have reached out end up doing a bunch of video content. Sometimes they end up just not. And I think that trial and error is big as a content creator, but I think a lot of people hesitate because they are worried about not doing a good job or what will people think, or maybe this isn't for me. At one point I put out my first podcast or I put out my first video, and after that I never stopped. And I think a lot of people end up doing that, but there's so many people that hesitate putting themselves out there. So I would say the number one thing is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You're gonna run into times where you really put your effort into something that doesn't work out. You're gonna run into times where you think you did something amazing that maybe not everybody saw eye to eye, and all you have to do is just keep rolling at the end of the day. I think content creating is a huge roller coaster. There's a lot of highs where you get the traction, you reap the rewards, and there's other times where you might miss, and you might just have to work back, reflect on what worked, what didn't work, and just try it again. So I think it's that. And the other thing too is if you want to be different, you got to work different. I think there's a lot of people that want things to be given to them, or they want to just grow. They want to just get all this traction on content. but they're not consistent and they don't just work enough. And I'm not saying, spend your whole life content creating, spend your whole day doing it. But if you truly want to grow as a creator, you got to work a bit different. You got to put in the effort. You got to be consistent, and it is a grind. So I would say those two big things for me.
That's great advice, Nick. Anything else that we haven't covered that you want to share before we wrap things up?
Sure. The last thing I'll say is make sure you follow this guy here below, John McGlynn, who's doing a great job on his podcast, featuring some great guests from the community. You can find him on Twitter. Just type in John McGlynn. I'm sure it'll pop up. What's your handle, John?
John McGlynn 75.
There we go. Follow this guy. And otherwise, it's a long off season. If you're a content creator, just keep getting after it. I'm sure there's people like myself, or we mentioned Kevin before, some other guys in the industry that will be very open to you DMing them and throwing ideas or asking for advice and things like that. Never hesitate to reach out to somebody, shoot your shots, put in the work, and enjoy it. There should be an escape for a majority of people at the end of the day, content creation. That's what it is for me. It's just a huge escape from everything else in life, and something I enjoy.
I love it. Now, where can listeners and viewers find you?
Sure. At P2W Fantasy on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. That's where a majority of my content is. I'm also on Instagram. If you type in Nick Skrip, I do a ton on TikTok. If you, again, just type in Nick Skrip, the Fantrax socials. If you go to their social medias on Twitter or X and Instagram and YouTube and all of those places, and you see stuff, it's probably stuff I put out there. So if you want to follow them, that'd be appreciated as well.
I love it. Now, John McGlynn, thank you so much for coming on. That was a fun idea. I think it worked out really well. I'm glad you were here. Again, all the great words you had for Nick is, spot on. Tell the listeners, viewers, where they can find you. I know that you have recently changed the commissioner evaluation show to the Dynasty evaluation show. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm still doing my commissioner evaluation stuff on Fantrax. I love the Fantrax site. I love working with Nick when I get a chance to. I went with Fantasy and Frames with Jorge Edwards, just to kind of expand a little bit, get with a different group, different people. And he asked me to do something different, a Dynasty evaluation, write some stuff up, right? And it's like Nick gave a bunch of advice too. And the thing I'm learning is that you don't have to put out something every day. You don't have to put something every week. When you get a chance to do something, do it at your pace. It doesn't matter if something comes out yesterday or this morning or tonight. Nobody's going to care if you don't keep your schedule. Just try to be consistent. Do something. I fall in the trap of my schedule. I don't get to put stuff out on a regular basis all the time. But again, we start getting excuses. Like Nick said, the more you work, the better you're going to get. And I can't say enough about Nick Skrip that shows about him. Just watch what he does. And just try to do 1/10 of what he does on a regular basis, and you'll be damn good at this whole, fantasy football thing, man.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on. It was a pleasure to have you on here. Glad we got this done and got an opportunity to spend some time together, and look forward to everything you got going in 2024, my man.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. You're doing a great job with this series. I've saw some awesome people in the industry being featured on here. Great person right here. And thanks again for having me. This was great. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, my man.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.